Okay, this is going to be a quick review of the courts that you read about on Tuesday. You're also going to take notes on those today, and we're also going to review over the two Venn diagrams that you made with yesterday's section. So let's start with your court. So this is a slide in the PowerPoint that you guys are going to use today to take notes with. And this kind of creates a little chart that's kind of a hierarchy system. So obviously at the top of your hierarchy is your Supreme Court. These two courts are known as appeals courts or appellate courts. This is where, and everything below that, all of these, including the superior, are called trial courts. So basically what happens if you do not like the way your case was resulted in a trial court, you can file for an appeal if you feel like something has been done. If new evidence comes about, you can file for an appeal. Your appeal can be denied or accepted, so not every case can get an appeal. If you do not like what happens in the Court of Appeals, you can take your case to the highest court in the case of state of Georgia, which is your Supreme Court. Your Supreme Court also is the court that deals with capital crimes. And a capital crime is something like a murder or something like that that could lead in a death penalty case. Okay? So the Supreme Court hears appeals as well as capital crimes cases. If you do not, you can take your court or your case even higher than the Georgia Supreme Court, and you can go to the U.S. Supreme Court. And they hear cases that deal with a violation of constitutional rights. So if you think about some of the cases that we have discussed that were U.S. Supreme Court cases, those would include Brown versus Board, etc., because that would actually affect the entire country, not just the state of Georgia. Okay, so one more time, your Court of Appeals is an appeals court that hears any case or reviews cases from a trial court. Your highest court in the state of Georgia is your Supreme Court, which deals with capital cases or capital crimes. Okay? Your next highest court is Superior Court. And Superior, just like what it says, deals with superior crimes. They deal with anything that would be considered a felony or civil cases that are above $15,000. So if you do something, car theft, auto theft, assault, these might be considered a felony, and they would be heard by the Superior Court. Now, all of your lower courts get a little bit confusing, so we're going to talk about what their jurisdiction is, meaning what kind of cases do they hear, okay? So the one that is the most self-explanatory is your juvenile court. It deals with anything dealing with a minor that is under the age of 17. This does not have to be a crime. It may also be about the child's health and well-being. If a child is in danger in their home, the juvenile court system will deal with it. The next easiest court to remember is your probate court, and I call this your paperwork court. Okay, this is the court that deals with all the paperwork of life. All your licenses to get married, firearms, wills, which remember we've talked about before, is the documents that someone has when they die and they leave items or their belongings to their family. So your probate court deals with paperwork. So the two P's, probate, paperwork. So your last two courts are a little confusing because they have some similarities. So if you look at the number, every single one of these courts have 159, and that is because we have 159 counties in Georgia. However, state courts only 70. So there is not a state court for every county in Georgia, only for your larger counties. Both of these courts do have some similarities. They both deal with issuing warrants, whether they be search or arrest warrants. Okay, your magistrate court, think about this one said superior, so these were your superior crimes like your felonies and your civil cases above 15,000. Your magistrate deals with your misdemeanor crimes. Okay, and they also deal with your civil cases that are less than 15,000. So your magistrate is dealing with your lesser crimes, your lesser money, your smaller cases. Now your state court, so Cobb County is a county that is large enough to have both a state and a magistrate court. In Cobb County, the state courts also deal with some minor offenses, specifically traffic tickets. If you have done a traffic violation in Cobb County, it is going to be your state court. But we also have a magistrate court that deals with other misdemeanors and other civil cases. So one more quick review. Both of these are appeals courts, and they both hear appeals, are appellate courts that hear appeals. Your Supreme Court is your highest court in Georgia, and they also hear any capital felony case. You've got your Superior Court, which deals with your felonies or your superior crimes, as well as your cases above 15,000. Juvenile Court is exactly what it sounds like. It deals with anyone under the age of 17. Your Probate Court is all of your paperwork, like your licenses and your wills. Magistrate is your minor offenses and your minor civil cases less than 15,000, and your state courts are basically minor things like traffic violations. Okay, so we're going to start with criminal and civil cases in the Venn diagram you were supposed to do yesterday. So the similarities is both of these kind of cases can go through a court system, but there's more differences and similarities. A criminal case actually means that you have broken a law. The case is brought against you by the state. So the state has a state prosecutor, and you have to get yourself a defense attorney and go to court. There are different levels of criminal cases. There are misdemeanors. There are also felonies. So these crimes vary. It can be a very low thing. A misdemeanor can be a traffic violation, or something like a felony that's as seriously as burglary or murder or assault. If it is a felony, it stays on your permanent record, okay, which we'll talk more about in the next slide. I almost forgot. Now, your civil cases is a claim that someone has done you wrong. No law has necessarily been broken, or it could go through the actual criminal courts. That means you felt that you have been done wrong by someone in a family member, a neighborhood, etc. How many of you like watching Judge Judy? All of those cases are civil cases. My boyfriend moved out, and so he set all my clothes on fire. My neighbor's dog bit me, and I'm suing for vet bills. My neighbor backed into the fence, and he needs to pay for the repair of my fence. So all of these cases have to do with personal injury. It can be anything that is a personal case. Again, no law has been broken. Okay, one more thing about your civil cases. So in the civil cases, there is two types of people. There is a plaintiff, and that is the person that is calling or making an accusation that someone has done something wrong. And there is a defendant. And the defendant is the person that comes in and defends that they did or did not do something that the plaintiff is accusing them of. Okay? So remember, in your civil or criminal cases, there isn't a plaintiff. It is a prosecutor, meaning the state is literally bringing charges against you because you broke a law of that state. Okay, so this one I pre-wrote because it's easier to kind of keep up with my thoughts. So the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony, or the similarity, is that both of them a law is broken and they both of them can be a court case. Your misdemeanors are your minor crimes, okay? That means they are punishable by less than 1 year in jail. You may also have a fine, or you may only have to pay a fine and no time in jail. You may be ordered to go to anger management, whatever, but less than a year in jail. Okay? There are no long-term consequences if you are charged with a misdemeanor, meaning it's not going to affect you in your workplace, etc., most of the time. These offenses are shoplifting. However, these are minor shoplifting. You can shoplift enough once it reaches a certain amount, then it would go from a misdemeanor to a felony. Almost all traffic violations, including DUIs, are considered misdemeanors, unless, of course, there's someone that died in the accident that happened, then it would turn into a felony. Assault cases, if you got in a fight in public, you could be charged with assault, but those are usually misdemeanors unless, depending on the amount of bodily harm done by the person and the intent of the fight. However, felonies are definitely more than 1 year in prison, plus a fine or more fines. There can also be capital felonies, and these are the ones where you could actually receive life in prison or the death penalty. Okay? The felonies, when you're charged with a felony, it is going to affect you long term. You lose your right to vote as a U.S. citizen until you have served the time and punishment for your felony. If you ever apply for a job, it will ask you, have you ever been charged with a felony? And you have to report that to your employer. So there's more long-term consequences if you commit a felony. Of course, these are your serious crimes: robbery, rape, murder. All of these would be considered, of course, drug charges. And depending on the amount of drugs that were involved, it could be a misdemeanor if it's a smaller quantity, but if it's a certain quantity, it becomes a felony. So these are things that everyone should be aware of. A felony can have very serious long-term consequences, and misdemeanors are definitely more minor charges. So I hope that helps a little bit. I'm also going to leave a form on my blog, so a Microsoft form. Please let me know what other questions you have, and I will do some additional review. I haven't forgotten about my shout outs. I've been thinking about them. I just haven't had the format in order to do them today, because I think that I'm going to share this with some other social studies classes, so I will definitely post some of that. I hope this helps. Let me know what other questions you have.